I'd just like to say before I start actually a really big thank you to Stuart, Joe and everyone in the team for inviting us over here. We've learned an enormous amount. I don't think we appreciated quite the size of the community that we were getting involved in, and we will be back. We've already worked out there's many people in our organisation at different levels who will really benefit from this. The other thing on a personal level is it's been a week since I put a tie on, and I think I'm realising quite how much I'm enjoying the hospitality as well. So excuse me if I wobble it a little bit. Right, okay. So we're going to talk to you about the benefits of asset management decision support tool for our PPP project in the UK. The agenda, I'm going to cover the first 2 points, the M25, an overview and introduction, give you some details around what we've got over there in the UK. Then we'll talk a bit about the journey we've been on with AgileAssets over the last 18 months or so. Then Clement is going to come up and he'll talk about the benefits of our decision support tool, some of the innovations that we've been working on in the AgileAssets configuration, and then we'll conclude with some discussion around the new way of managing our asset management program. So, to kick off then, the M25, a PPP DBFO, so we talked about 3-letter acronyms, well we've put a 4-letter acronym in there, so public-private partnership, I think everyone's familiar with, but DBFO is design, build and finance and operate. And that's what effectively the M25 project is for us, and that's how it's referred to generally within the UK. So if I ask you just to brace yourselves, I'll now put a picture of the M25 up for you. There it is. Okay. So that's the end of the presentation. No, it's not. Okay. Right. Okay. But small but perfectly formed is what I say. And I think, just to put some sort of context in here, we've got a population in England of sort of circa 50 million. Inside of Greater London, it's circa 8 to 10 million, and in the south of England, it's 8 to 10 million, which gives you an example of, in the centre of that circle there, our ring road, the volume of people and movements that you've got, but also around the edges as well. The idea of an orbital road around London was first discussed in 1937, we found out, but us true Brits don't like to rush anything, so it was 1973 before work actually began on connecting the first sections. And I say connecting the first sections because it wasn't a new road, it was effectively the joining up of many parts of the UK infrastructure and building some additional parts. And all that took until 1986 before what you see there as the M25 was officially opened and became known as the M25. Several people have asked me why M25? Why is it called the M25? Well, in the UK, quite simply, all our motorways start with an M, and the number 25 was the next one on the list at the time. It's really as simple as that. So just to try and put some significance around that relatively small dot on our map. And this is where we start to raise the bar a little bit, raise the profile about what we're dealing with here, and we start to you start to get a picture, hopefully, as to why we need to work towards a system such as the AgileAssets system for what we're actually trying to do. So it is a ring road around London, but it's a local commuter route. We've got 33 junctions around the M25, and many people join on one and go off on the next one, or 2 or 3. Very few people actually drive more than sort of half or a third of the M25 to get somewhere. So we have a really high volume of people who literally hop on and hop off. We're 440 kilometres in total. 220 of that if you were to drive around the M25, you'd be driving 220 kilometres. But the other 220, almost exactly, is what we call stubs and tails, and it's all the little arterial roads that you see coming off of the M25. And that, in terms of Highways England, the government organisation that effectively owns this, that's what they refer to as the M25, including those stubs and tails. It is one of Europe's busiest motorways. It carries 15% of all UK motorway traffic, which is quite phenomenal. Over 200,000 vehicles per day. It's the hub of the UK motorway network for us because if you took the M1, which is Britain's first motorway, which takes you up north, that effectively comes from the top of the M25 and goes up. So it's a real, and to the west and the east and the south. So it really is the hub of everything that goes on around our network. And importantly, it has access to three of the world's the world's busiest airports. We've got Gatwick, we've got Heathrow, and we've got Stansted. Now in England, there's only really 4 significant airports, so 3 of them rely on the M25 to get people to and from the airport itself. So as you can imagine, we're in the media almost every day, unfortunately for the wrong reasons, normally around congestion. When we're not in the media, it just means that we're doing a good job. So it's a really significant national asset. It's considered a national asset, and it's the subject of much debate, particularly at election time, so like we're going through now, and generally around sort of the economics of the UK PLC. So some context around Connect Plus and the contract that we won back in 2009. So at the time, and even now actually from a Highways England perspective, it's the largest ever contract that was let. It was something totally new and different. Highways England used to let 5-year contracts, maybe 5+2. Generally they were sort of term maintenance and renewal type contracts. So the DBFO or the PPP was something very new for Highways England. We started as a consortium bidding for this in 2007, and the contract was awarded to us eventually in 2009. The contract is to widen the motorway to 4 lanes, which has now been completed. Not all of it, just 2, 3, 4 rather significant sections. Operate and maintain the network for 30 years. So about 3 billion of that was the widening works. Operate, maintain the network for 30 years. And all of that around 2009, as I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, was in pretty tough economic climate in terms of banking markets, etc. Connect Plus is responsible for circa £1.2 billion worth of asset renewals over that 30-year period in a predefined model. So to win the bid, we had to put a model on the table that said this is how much we need every year to renew the assets as part of the asset management profile. We get paid that every year, and again, you can start to see why we need systems to help us make sure we've got things like that right. So in terms of the contractual setup, so the Secretary of State is the government. That's the best way of looking at it. Highways England used to be called up until the 1st of April the Highways Agency, and they were effectively a government department. From the 1st of April, they became a government-owned company, which means effectively they've been pushed into the private sector to work alongside the private sector. And in doing that, they lose a lot of the kind of Crown immunity that they've been used to. So from a safety legislation point of view, they can be prosecuted, they couldn't before. They have their own budgets and they have their own funding cycles, and it's the government way of turning effectively state-owned assets into a more private sector way of running things. Network Rail, which is our rail operating organisational company, is effectively a good example of another government-owned organisation. So Highways Agency, or Highways England as they're known now, they're the ultimate client. They let the contract to a special purpose vehicle called Connect Plus. The funding for Connect Plus, the shareholders for Connect Plus are 3 organisations: Skanska, Balfour Beatty, primarily both construction organisations that I'm sure you've heard of; Atkins, which is primarily professional services and consultancy; and Aegis, which are European road highway operators and toll operators. So a fairly high profile team of people with mixed skills, or organisations with mixed skills to cover the demands of the contract. You'll see on the left-hand side there, lenders, 29 commercial banks plus the European Investment Bank. That's what makes up the £6.2 billion. So can you imagine working with 29 banks to try and get things done? It's not easy, and there are some changes that have gone on in the first 3 or 4 years of the contract. You know, some of the widening changes, some of the technology improvements at Dartford, our Dartford Bridge, which have required elements of contract change. And all 29 banks need to be consulted in one form or another and buy into the situation. So just to give you an example, Connect Plus are going through a refinancing programme towards the latter part of this year, which we hope will see a reduction in those 29 banks. The 29 banks were required at the time because of the economic climate, and effectively it was all about sharing the risk and sharing the load. The issue is that most of those banks are making very little or any money out of this project because the rates at the time were so low, which means they put a lot of pressure on us to look for an excuse to leave the project. So performance measures and performance requirements are something that we're scrutinised over quite frequently to ensure that the banks are getting what they need and that there aren't excuses there. In simple terms, they'd love to. Some of them would love to first default on it, and then they'd offer us a new deal the next day, but at a lot higher rate. So you can see where this is going. So Connect Plus is a special purpose vehicle, and Connect Plus employs about 25 to 30 people. And the ultimate role of Connect Plus is assurance and investment. They're responsible for ensuring that the money, that £1.2 billion, is invested properly in the assets. And they're responsible for the assurance of the operations and maintenance and all the other parts of the contract. The construction joint venture is effectively a dormant organisation now, but that was the organisation that was set up to do the widening works and the main construction for the first 5 years of the project. The Connect Plus supply chain is a group of contractors effectively who are on broadly 5-year framework contracts for doing the main works, so resurfacing, bridge renewals and the general kind of renewal works that are associated with the asset management work. Connect Plus Services, and that's where I work for. I'm the asset director in Connect Plus Services. We're a team of just less than 700. And in that team there, we effectively have a pass-down contract, a direct pass-down contract from Connect Plus. So it goes from Highways England to Connect Plus directly to us. And we have 3 operational directorates. The Operations and Maintenance Directorate, which is the people you see out on the road mainly, doing anything from litter collection, dealing with potholes, managing operations, incidents, accidents. We then have the Project Delivery Directorate, and they're responsible for managing the Connect Plus supply chain to deliver the renewals works on a year-by-year basis. And then we have the Asset Directorate, which is mine, which is responsible for undertaking all the asset inspections, doing the analysis and the intelligence around what we want to do, looking at the condition profiling of the assets, and then putting together a forward plan every year that has a 1-year view, a 5-year view, and a 30-year view. And Clement will talk a little bit more about that 30-year view when he comes up here. But in essence, every year we put that plan together, and that's effectively the drawdown from the model of money on an annual basis that we referred to earlier. Okay, so just to give you a bit of a view of some of our assets, we have 14 asset categories there. Pretty straightforward stuff, not a lot different, I'm sure, to what you have over here. We have 14 asset categories. We were required by year 2 in the contract to do a baseline condition score against each of those 14 asset categories. We're required by year 30 to hand back those assets in broadly the same condition as they were at year 2. That's the simplest way of looking at it. And again, Clement will go into a bit more detail around what that really means for us. You can see the non-DBFO asset there. We're good, but we're not that good, okay? So, and just to give you a flavour really for those asset categories, that's our QE2 bridge. So if anyone talks to you about the QE2 bridge or Dartford, that's it. That's what it looks like. And that goes across the Thames in essence. And that's the bit that kind of joins the M25 together. So it is an orbital road and it uses the bridge to effectively join it together. So we have around 150,000 assets, about 1,800 structures, 760 bridges. Quite often on the M25 you'll drive over many structures just to get from 1 or 2 junctions to another couple of junctions. People don't realise what they're actually driving over. One cable-stayed bridge, the QE2 bridge. We have 5 tunnels. Now, I believe there's 7 tunnels in England, in the UK, and we have 5 of them, or major tunnels anyway. So again, we are the national asset element is quite significant in terms of making sure that things are working. We've got 40 kilometres of pavement or footways, in essence, around the M25 in various places. About 18,000 lighting assets with quite onerous energy management targets around. Roughly 400 kilometres of drainage, 8,000 signs, give or take a few. It's quite hard to get that one accurate. And increasingly, our technology asset portfolio is getting greater and greater as years go by, because in essence, we're in a world now where the Highways Agency have run out of land. So they had land adjacent to the M25, and they've widened the network now from a 3-lane to a 4-lane. Actually, they haven't got any more land either side. So to actually widen the M25 further would be a significant land purchase. It would be a real kind of public inquiry type thing, and it would be significant. So the use of technology now to actually make our journeys more efficient and capacity schemes more efficient is becoming more and more, which means more and more assets or technology assets are finding their way onto our network. Okay, so that's just a bit of background really around that little small circle that I showed you on the map and why it is so significant. And really why it's so important as a business, but also as a collection of assets, an organisation and UK PLC that we get this right. So I'm just got a couple of slides here just to share with you the journey that we've been on with AgileAssets and recognising our need for a state-of-the-art system. So after about 3 years, we started to really have some doubts around how we were performing as an asset management directorate, asset management team. And we came together quite bluntly in a traditional workshop environment to say, yeah, what's going wrong? It just feels that we're all working extremely hard. We use the phrase busy fool syndrome. So we had lots of people rushing around doing the same thing in 7 different ways to try and meet a contractual outcome. And we had about 9 areas of concern which were distilled down to 5. And one of them was something we called, a work stream we called AMS-IT, Asset Management System IT. And it became increasingly aware to us that we had this scenario where back in 2007 we put a bid together where we were talking about spending £1.2 billion. And as a consortium, we looked around in our toolbox and we found this system that we'd used on a few other contracts, and we went, that'll do. We'll put that into the bid, and that will be our asset management offering. And that's what we did. And we carried on getting on with mobilising the contract and working through and doing that condition score and the inspections and everything I spoke about, without really paying too much attention to, are we anywhere near the profile we need to be, or do we understand the deterioration modelling? And these are all words that people say, well, say that again, what do you mean by deterioration modelling, et cetera, et cetera. So we started to go on this learning experience that really showed us that we hadn't got what we needed in our tool. And one of the outcomes as well during that period was realising that we were creating an environment where our people were not able to perform against these rather onerous contractual requirements because the IT systems weren't up to what they were doing. So the system we realised that we had a very low user adoption rate. So we created an environment where people were doing workarounds. They were working out different ways of achieving the same outcome by going around the system. Incapable of managing all asset categories. If we just had linear assets, we just had pavement and fencing and barrier, I probably wouldn't be standing here. We'd have stuck with what we got and developed it further. That was about the level of the limit of what we actually had. From a structures perspective, we really were not utilising the system in any way or form, and it couldn't do what we really wanted it to do. The data quality was pretty poor as a result of some of that. We didn't have any predictive analysis capability, which meant in turn it was incapable of supporting those investment decisions. And that last line there, an emerging team of engineers becoming hobby IT specialists. I have a professional head of structures who basically was knocking on my desk every day saying, I need more resource, I need more resource, I need more structures engineers. And when we dug deeper, what we found was these highly intelligent, bright people were pushing the boundaries of Excel to put together a deterioration modelling system because they recognised that they needed to do it to comply with the contract and ensure that we met the business requirements. But we didn't have one. So they invented one, and we nearly became a competitor to AgileAssets, to be honest. But I like to think so anyway, but never mind. But that's in essence where we were. We had this scenario. We had this great group of people, really intelligent, who were doing everything they possibly could to try and deliver this onerous set of performance requirements. So we went on a journey. And we've been doing this since about January 2013, and you can see from there that we've been on a series of steps. We have a really complex environment that we work in, and what I mean by that is the way we're set up as joint venture organisations. So we have many masters and people to put things through before we can move forward. But certainly from January through to August, we spent a lot of time really doing what I was talking about on the previous slide. Analysing what we currently had, being really sure and being really, in depth with ourselves and navel gazing around. Is it the fact that we're just not using the system we've got properly? Is it the fact that we're just not instructing our people and educating them how to do things? And working out exactly what we had, where we needed to improve. And initially we approached this looking for a decision support tool, not the MMS part, just the decision support tool, because we thought we just needed to bolt that on to what we already had. It quickly became clear that we needed to look at something that did the whole job for us. And our early thinking as well was that we didn't want something that was made up of lots of component parts all bolted together. We wanted to ideally go to one kind of single source system. So that first period was really looking around what it was that we needed and being absolutely crystal clear what we needed there. From September to January, that was the painful bit, to be honest. We spent a lot of time looking at what was in the market, what was out there, what sort of systems could we go for, and what was it that we wanted to play with. We actually did a desktop study of 50 vendors, so 49 of your competitors as well. We did a desktop study to look at everything that was out there that we could consider using. 12 of those vendors did a presentation to us, and we then eventually went out to tender for 2, yourselves being one of them, and we did a couple of site visits. We went over to Israel with Pascal, etc., and had a look at what was going on, and eventually yourselves were the winners of the tender. That was probably the easy bit. The hardest bit, certainly for me, was convincing our main joint venture board that we needed this. And I can remember the first of 4 presentations I did to the board around a relatively straightforward business case, well, that's what we thought it was, around why we needed to do something different. And we realised we had to take our board on a full journey of what the handback criteria was and what we actually needed to do. So it was only when we realised that some of the members of the audience were the people that had selected the system all those years ago that we were using. We had to get through that kind of stumbling block. But we did it, and we're very pleased we did. And I think we're now into this implementation phase from the beginning of last year. We've gone live with our structures elements. We're rapidly following through with our pavement work. And as I say, I think we've learnt a lot in the last couple of days already where we can move forward with other products and systems that you have to help us look at this 30-year contract. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Clement now, who's going to get into some of the detail behind the decision support tool processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Thank you, Byron, and good morning, everyone. So let's talk into more details about why we wanted a decision support tool and what benefits we expect from it. So first, there are 2 essential reasons. So the first one, we have a performance contract, and the second one, Connect Plus is responsible for asset renewals. So let me explain. So there are 3 main asset management drivers in our contract. The first one is what we call the handback obligations. So the handback obligations, it's a set of obligations that we have to meet at the end of our 30-year contract. So an example, it's the condition test. So we have the obligation to measure the condition of the asset categories. So for example, the pavement category or the structures category. And so during the 2 first years of our contract, we actually established a baseline, and the obligation is at the end of our contract, we have to hand back the assets in no worse condition than it was when we established the baseline. So as you can see on the graph, it can go above the baseline, it can go below. All what matters is that at the end, it is above this baseline. So this is an example of a handback obligation, but I'm simplifying actually because we have about 10 obligations, 10 tests that we need to verify for each asset category at the end of the contract. And it includes also expenditure tests, lane closure tests. So this is the first driver. The second one is what we call the payment mechanism, payment condition requirements. So in our contract, we have a set of 7 condition requirements for the pavement. And if a section of our network fails any of these requirements, we consider it to be defective. So our obligation is that every month, we have to report on the percentage of the network that is defective. And we have a threshold that we have to stay under. So during the first 3 years of the contract, we had to have less than 15% of the network being regarded as defective. And from the year 3 until the end of the contract, so where we are now, it has to be below 30%. So what's important is that it's a requirement that we have to meet constantly. And the last one, the last driver, is that we have to maintain a safe and reliable network. So you will tell me it sounds more simple than the 2 other requirements, but actually, no, it's not. Because it's actually very subjective if you think of it. How do you measure that assets are safe and reliable? And even more complicated, how do you forecast it? So the idea that we have in Connect Plus is that we'll develop a risk index, especially for the structures. It will be an index that will tell us, based on road user safety or on network availability, if this asset is at risk or not. And we will try to maintain this risk under an acceptable threshold. So I've just presented to you the performance requirements. So now let's talk about the financial aspects of our asset management. So Byron mentioned to you that we have a financial model of about 1.2 billion pounds over 30 years. And this financial model, it was agreed when we signed the contract. So this is what is used to derive our revenues, and it's fixed. It's not going to change. Our revenue have been agreed at the beginning of the contract. And if you remember, I just told you that we are responsible for asset renewal. So what it means that we have the risk of asset renewal. If we end up spending more, this is our risk. We may lose money. But if we spend less, this is our saving also. So we can increase actually our profitability if we perform well. And so in blue, this is the financial model, and where we are here in orange, it's the cumulative expenditure to date. So I mean, we are in line. It looks like we are doing pretty well. Actually, there is a problem. The problem is that this financial model, which was developed at the tender stage and was signed with the contract, it was developed without any consideration for the handback obligation, for the simple reason that we didn't know how to forecast it at the time of the tender. So the problem that we have now is that when we have to actually invest in order to meet these obligations, we may actually end up being above this model. And this is a huge risk. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of million pounds. So for shareholders, it's huge. And actually, today, this is the biggest risk of this project. But interestingly, since we have started to implement AgileAssets, and over the past 2 years, with the journey that we have been on and that Byron has just described, there is a change of culture that has started to happen. Because people have started to think, but yeah, this is a big risk. But if we are good at asset management, if we are able to optimize our asset management strategy and our work plans, we can beat this financial model. So now people are also starting to think of it as an opportunity, and it's a real change of culture that has been happening in the past months in our organization is that people are thinking, yeah, this is our biggest risk, but this is actually our biggest opportunity. So to summarize, what are the benefits that we expect from the decision support tool? So the first one is that we want to have the assurance through a documented process that our asset management strategy will allow us to achieve zero earnback obligations. So we want to be able to forecast it and have a financial profile associated to it. And this is critical to our shareholders, of course, our lenders, so the 29 banks that we spoke about, and our client, obviously. And it is critical, especially as we have not been able to demonstrate it since the start of this contract. So this is really critical. It's the main expectation. The second one is to improve our asset management strategy. And I want you to understand that in a wide meaning, because we want to include things like also the R&D strategy under that, meaning that if when we run scenarios and we analyze reports, work plans, we see that we have a lot of work to do on a particular type of asset or a particular type of treatment, actually we should target our R&D or also our value management on these particular treatments or assets, because it's here that we'll derive the most value out of it. And also we can include under this improving our procurement strategy. If we do a lot of work on a particular type of expansion joint, why don't we change the way we procure it? So this is the asset management strategy in a wide context. And obviously, we want to optimize our asset management forward plan, our work plan. Because all we are about is to do the right works at the right time, at the right place. We want to invest the best way possible. So now I'm going to speak about some innovations that we have achieved in configuring AgileAssets. And as you understand, so we are quite a different client for AgileAssets. We have a different perspective. And because of that, we have had sometimes some unusual requests. And so we have had actually to push back the limits of the system sometimes because we are taking it from a different perspective. And what I want to insist on also here, and that I'm very proud of, is that it has been through a lot of collaboration between Connect Plus and AgileAssets. We have really been working as one team. It was one of the key things. So first innovation is a very high level of customization, because we want our scenario constraints to be modeled in order to match our contractual obligations. And I will be honest, I mean, it's not easy, especially as when the contract was written, nobody thought about, oh, how are we going to optimize it? Nobody thought of that. It was written by people writing performance requirements in a contract, but without any thought of how it would be optimized. And so what we have had to do is actually to translate these obligations into an algorithm that is compatible with the analytical framework in AgileAssets. And we have been able to do it, first, thanks to the flexibility of AgileAssets software. And I mean, when we think of the procurement process we have been going through and we take a step back, in my mind, the flexibility of AgileAssets is the reason why we selected this system. It allows us to do a lot of things, and it allows us to do what we want to do. And the second thing is our team's strong commitment and creative ideas. I mean, I have to say we are really lucky in Connect Plus because we have been able to build a very strong team, including asset engineers, IT experts, but a very committed and strong team that have brought a lot of ideas on the table. So I will just go through a few of them. So complex weighting criteria to model the definition of a pavement asset. So actually in our contract, a pavement asset has a definition that is quite wide and quite multiform sometimes. So it will include asphalt surface carriageway, concrete surface carriageway, but footways also will fall under the pavement asset definition. It will include high friction surfacing. After, sometimes we are considering just one lane. Sometimes we have group lanes together. And it makes it actually very complex to model. And actually, we are able to model the condition of the pavement category as a weighted average using by building a very complex rated criteria. So it was quite an achievement. The second one is optimization of structures at span level. Actually, in our bridge management system, we have a 4-level inventory. We have sub-element, element, span, and structure. The challenge that we have is that in the decision support tool, we have only 2 levels. We have the element level and the span level. But the problem is that in our contract, we are supposed to optimize at the structure level. So actually what our team did, we did a bit of mathematics and a bit of demonstration in order to demonstrate that by optimizing at the span level, we will obtain the exact same result as optimizing at the structures level. And so it allowed us to implement this type of obligation in AgileAssets. And the 3 others, so it's the cumulative cost, the payment mechanism, proxy indicator, the risk index. It's 3 other examples of innovative approaches. But what I would like to talk also about now in terms of innovation, it's the granularity of the structure model. What I think is uncommon is that we have 100 structural elements. So the reason why we have so many elements, it was first to align with our contractual obligations. It was the way we had to divide the structure into elements was defined in our contract through some standards. And also it's aligned with the way we collect inspection data on structures. And so it was an obligation, but also we hope that it will help us deliver more accurate forecasts to be so granular. The problem we have is that we started the implementation and we decided to start running some scenarios and it did not work. The system just could not cope with the size of the performance tree. So we hit a wall and we are actually wondering how are we going to deal with that. And so what is really good, actually we sorted the problem through a very strong collaboration between AgileAssets and Connect Plus. And so now the problem has been resolved, and the good news is that this enhancement will be in the service pack 1, so it will be for everybody. So now just to conclude, I would like to talk about how we perceive this project. Because even if we are here in this conference to talk about an asset management software, for us it's not just an IT project. It's a business project. It's about a new way of managing assets. So this is actually an animation. I think that by now you should have realized that I like animations. And this is something I presented to a Connect Plus team meeting to show how it's going to transform our processes and our business. So I found it was quite powerful because it shows how we are starting from a pretty simple process and we are going to a much more sophisticated process. And what is interesting also is that we are structuring our organizations around AgileAssets. And what is also very important that I realized when I was doing this slide is actually it's involving everybody in the business. It's not just involving one team like the asset team, it's involving everyone. Everyone has a part to play in this business process. And so this is the reason why it's really a business project. It's not just an IT project. And so it's actually a big success factor that we have identified is about managing change properly. So because of that, because we have identified this need, we have created what we call a change workstream. And this is a team of people whose role is to do some stakeholder engagement, to revise our business processes, and also to do training, so training on AgileAssets, but also training on the new business processes. And so what we want to do now is, we are still in the implementation phase of AgileAssets, and we want to take actually the output of AgileAssets progressively. We don't want to have a big change overnight, but we want to move progressively to also make the system more acceptable, and so it's to achieve a successful project. So what we have done, like for example, in January of this year, we have done what we call condition benefit reporting. So what we did, we took the asset management forward plan that had been prepared as per our old processes. So, as per quite traditionally, just with some good engineering judgment and some simple risk analysis, but rather, not a very long-term vision. And so we took this plan and we put it in the decision support tool to assess what benefit we would get from this plan. So it was a first step, a first output, and we were able to present it to our board, to our client. And the next step, which is here a key milestone, is to revise the 30-year plan. So to create a 30-year plan that will achieve the handback obligations. And this is a target that we have for July, for the summer, I would say. But eventually, what is our ultimate goal? It would be to have a package annual plan coming directly out of AgileAssets. So that's it for me. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to take them.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.